welcome to another episode of Inspiring and Able. I am Eliza, and today I'm very pleased to introduce the leader of the Alberta Liberal Party to talk about the new disability benefit and advocacy steps forward. Please help me welcome Mr. John Longavine. Welcome, sir.
Oh, you're most welcome to have me on your show. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, can I ask you what brings you here today, essentially?
Well, I'm always happy to talk to people that are interested. I'm going to try and put my phone on mute so it doesn't make a bunch of noise. Sorry about that. Did that, I think. Yeah, I'm always interested to talk to people who are interested in Alberta politics and those issues, and what the Alberta Liberal Party can or may be able to do to try and advance the interests of people of all different walks of life. So I'm happy to talk to you today.
Thank you. And I often find that when we talk about disability, people usually have experience with disability, and if you don't, and if you're not alive, forgive me, but what is your experience with, like, disability issues?
I have some experience with disability issues. I know some people and have acted for some people. I'm a lawyer, and I've acted for some people that have that are disabled or have been disabled, some of whom have passed away, but of various disabilities, physical and mental disabilities. Probably more mental disabilities than physical disabilities, but I have acted for a few people with physical disabilities as well, or sometimes their parents. So that's the extent of my background. I'm not disabled, but I do know quite a few people who have some disability. Of course, it differs in degree. Some people are more disabled than others, obviously.
Right. So, the new disability benefit is on topic right now, especially because people are worried, especially within this province of Alberta, that there's going to be a lot of pushback. And I suppose my question is, as a leader of the Liberal Party, how do you see the benefit working or not working, and what are the steps we can take as a national community to make it work better, and maybe fix some of the shortcomings if you see that there are any?
Well, as I understand it, and my information has come through people that I know that are disabled, there's a disappointment in the disability community about the amount of the disability benefit, for one thing. I'm not sure why that is. I know that the federal Liberals, and I can take no credit for the disability benefit because the Alberta Liberals are not the federal Liberals. But from what I know about it, the federal Liberals have at least brought the disability benefit in, which is a good thing. But it's certainly not in the amount that people were hoping it to be. Why that is, we can go into maybe later, but from the standpoint of its shortcomings, aside from financial, I mean, the other thing that I understand is that they're basing the disability benefit on whether you qualify for the Canada Disability
Tax rate?
Yeah, and so as a result of that, it's some of the people that are disabled that should be covered are not covered because they're not under the current disability benefit, and so they don't qualify under the federal rules at this time. So there's some kinks to work out for sure. And to the extent that we can lobby the federal Liberals, and they're a little bit more open to lobbying, I guess, maybe from us than maybe some other groups. We will do that and try and get across the need to help disabled people in Alberta. The disability community and disabled people, or the amount that they receive under the AISH program in Alberta is under the poverty line. So there's definitely shortcomings there, even after it was increased by Alison Redford a few premiers ago, and then right near the end of the NDP term where they indexed it, and then Jason Kenney got in and de-indexed it. We'll see what the current premier does, but I'm not terribly hopeful. I haven't seen a lot from the UCP that suggests to me that they're really all that worried about it or interested in it
Right.
at this point. Which is troubling. Looking after the most vulnerable in our society should be a top priority of the government, and it certainly doesn't seem to be at this point.
And as a government official, what is the best way to approach government so it does become a priority? Because I find that the approach of last time didn't seem to be heard, and I think that is where a lot of the disappointment comes in. So, what is the best way, in your opinion, as a lawyer and as the leader of a political party, that advocates can come in and really feel like it's a more collaborative effort?
Well, certainly we do need a more collaborative government, but that's again another issue. I'm happy to talk about that too with you sometime, but it doesn't specifically directly affect the disabled community. What I would suggest is that you talk to, particularly in Alberta, you should talk to the Liberal MPs. So Randy Boissonneau in Edmonton and George Shahal in Calgary. They're the ones that can get the information back to the federal Liberal cabinet the fastest. When I get a chance to talk to those two gentlemen, I will also bring the issue up. And I probably will talk to them because we cross paths every so often. So I will get a chance to talk to them, and I will ask them what's going on and how things can be improved. But it's really important that the disabled community and the people that advocate for them, because sometimes they have difficulty advocating for themselves for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
That they lobby those people and try and get to them. The federal minister is also somebody you could write to and follow up with. I'm sure that I'm sure they have good intentions. They have some concerns right now because they're getting a lot of heat from particularly the Conservatives, who according to the polls, seem to be leading in the polls, that the Liberals have spent a lot of money and they've got us in a bigger deficit. And so there's a lot of heat from that standpoint in terms of spending money. And so consequently, new programs like the disability benefit that they were bringing in probably didn't get funded as much because of that. The other reason they might not have got funded is because, honestly, I don't think the federal government knows at this point what the provinces are going to do. If the federal government provides money under that benefit, and then the government of Alberta claws it back, you're no further ahead. So and the federal government is even further behind. So I think that might be part of their motivation for rolling it out, slowly. These programs generally do take some time to roll out, and they have to be rolled out gradually. The same thing with the dental benefit, for example, that got rolled out to, I think, 87-year-olds, and they're working on rolling it out to other people, working from the oldest to the youngest in that order, and maybe with the exception of the children. So the people in the middle are not being covered at the moment. And so there are gaps in the programs, and just like there's a gap in the disability program. But they will, in good faith, I think they'll try to fill those gaps as time goes on. It just takes time.
And that's similar to my opinion, which is why I've had you on here today, is I was kind of wondering if you had any, what's the best way to approach the gentleman you mentioned for advocacy groups? Because I think we've tried let's swap them with postcards approach. We've tried the lobbying, we've tried to big reports. So what's the, like, if you were them, what's the way you would feel most, what is the technique you would say is the most effective when approaching these two gentlemen that you've mentioned, so that it's not overwhelming for them, but the disability community still feels heard?
Well, I think the best thing is just to try and meet with them in person if you can. I know, well, Randy Boissonnault, I believe, is a cabinet minister, so he's got a direct input into cabinet, but he's also harder to meet with because he's in cabinet, I suspect, than George Shahal, who's in Calgary. So, I mean, distance may also be a problem. If you're in Edmonton, it's a little hard to lobby somebody that's in Calgary. Having said that, I think that's a good approach. I do think that it's also worthwhile for the disabled community to put as their concerns out to the provincial government.
Right.
Because if the provincial government goes along with the program, then it's going to be easier to get it rolled out, I think, as well. And if the provincial government can actually lobby for that program to be funded and give some assurances to the federal government, they're not going to claw the money back, for example, then there's likely to be more collaboration and the process is likely to work better for disabled people. So I would just keep up, meetings with them and keep reminding them that this is a concern. And I mean, there's no other way to really put pressure on them other than to just keep raising your concerns, showing them why they need to deal with the issue. Because like many things, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so to speak. And so, keep being the squeaky wheel, not with the provincial government and the federal government, and try and find allies out there in the community that will, like the Alberta Liberals, that's a good thing, but there's other people out there in the community, charitable groups that may also be able to bend the ear of the government and get them to work with you and work on getting the federal government to deal with the issues that are outstanding.
Yes, I agree for sure. And so one's, and I ask this because sometimes when we get allies, or not get, but sometimes allies can go, we are gonna promise you this, we're gonna work with you, and then the motivation dies down. So my premise for this next, with that is the premise for the next question. My question is, what is your motivation for being the leader of the Liberal Party for Alberta? Like, what motivates you? What inspires you?
Well, that's a big question. uh, I, I personally am the leader of the Liberal Party almost by default because I agreed to step in as interim leader when Dave Kahn stepped down. And that's over 2 years ago now. And so and then nobody else wanted to take up the mantle, so I became the permanent leader, and at least permanent until they replaced me. My motivation for stepping up to be the interim leader and to carrying on is that I believe that the Alberta Liberal Party has an important role to play in Alberta politics, and hopefully we can get some members in the legislature so that our voice will be louder, so to speak. The media doesn't tend to cover us because we're not in the legislature. Even when we were in the legislature, we didn't get that much coverage, but when we were in the legislature, at least we got some coverage, which we don't at the moment. And so I see that as a hurdle that we've got to jump over. But I believe the Alberta Liberals are a party that can best balance all the interests in the province. We're not in the pocket of the unions, we're not in the pocket of the business community. Maybe that's why we don't have lots of money in our bank account. But the reality is that because are who we are, we can speak for everybody and understand everybody's issues and work with everybody and hopefully reach a cooperative solution to problems. We are particularly interested in looking after vulnerable Canadians, vulnerable Albertans in particular. And there are various groups. This disabled are one of them. And you mentioned how people get distracted, and I think that's true. I mean, sometimes it's like people are following whatever's the issue of the day, and after a certain period of time, other issues take precedence. So that's why I say you have to just keep up the meetings, keep up. No, you don't have to have super pressure, but I think if you keep reminding people that this is a continual problem that has to be dealt with, they will remember that they need to deal with it, and they will eventually deal with it. It may take some time, and they may be able to explain to you what the holdup is as well. I have my suspicions as to what they are, but I'm not in federal cabinet, and I only know so much as they would tell me. And as I said, the provincial party and the federal party aren't the same. So, the information that I get is what they are willing to tell me too.
Right.
I would hope that they would, address those issues with more details if they spoke to you directly.
Yes. And thank you so much for telling me a couple names, because I'm sure my friends will appreciate it, to have somebody to actually go to. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, oh yeah, and don't hesitate to drop us a line at the Alberta Liberal Party and remind us that that's still a concern for you. Like, certainly, to the extent that we can put pressure on provincial officials and raise the issue provincially, we will do that. And it doesn't hurt to remind us too, because we suffer to some extent from the same problems that other people do and getting distracted on other issues. It's not that we've forgotten about you, that's for sure.
No.
But but it may appear like that sometimes. So it never hurts to get back to us and talk to us. I mean, I got inundated during the election with emails from various groups, and I don't think they read our platform, for example, because some of the issues were clearly dealt with in our platform, and they should have known what our position was and that we would be in favor of their position on those particular issues. I don't want to go into specifics too much, but right now, one of the big issues is the cost of living. That hits hard on everybody, but it hits hardest on the people at the very bottom of the financial pole, so to speak.
Yes.
And so the disabled and other vulnerable groups are quite often the ones that are the most hurt by the problems with the standard of living. So, cost of living issues are up there. Part of our platform was to try and increase the amount of money that the government was going to put forward for affordable housing, for example. And that's really an important issue right now.
Yes.
I'm not even sure that the money that we were planning to put forward would have been enough. We might have even had to increase that. And part of that is making sure that the buildings that are built and the housing that's built is wheelchair accessible and usable by people that are disabled. I mean, that's an ongoing problem. Society's been working on it, but with only a certain degree of success so far. So yep. I know that still is a hurdle, and a lot of times there's places that disabled people would be happy to rent, but they can't even rent it because they can't get access to it. Right. I remember there was a condo that I owned at one point, and they had a space in there. Then I said, well, why don't you develop this for use by a disabled person? It wasn't particularly big, but for somebody that needed wheelchair access, there was wheelchair access, ramps, and ways in which they could have developed a space for the disabled person. And that would have had, been one space in that condo that would have provided for wheelchair access for someone that's probably lower income, because it would have been a smaller location. But I think it possibly would have been adequate. I don't think they even looked into that. So, the government can help by bringing in these kinds of programs to make things wheelchair accessible, to build smaller units, maybe that are, that aren't perhaps ideal, but they allow enough space to have a dignified lifestyle. And that's an important part of living. We can't evaluate people on how much they can return to society always. We have sometimes people can do the best they can, and still they, for whatever reason, can't contribute enough in the eyes of the government. That's I think there was a lot of that kind of attitude under the Kenney government. I don't see that it's changed all that much under the Smith government. But we have a responsibility, a moral responsibility, to help the people in our society that are vulnerable, including the disabled, and we should be looking into those things. We can't have a society that's just, well, we're just going to let everybody fend for themselves, because
No.
it's not just the disabled, it's also the people around them.
Yeah.
I have a friend who has a son who's got autism, and a son that doesn't have autism, and even the son that doesn't have autism, his life has been affected by the fact he's got a brother that has autism, because his parents couldn't spend the time with him because they had to spend more time with the autistic child, understandably. But the effects of it go beyond just the disabled people to their families and their relatives. And so there's lots of people that are affected by this, and the government needs to step up and do the right thing and treat people with dignity.
Yes, and when it comes to provincial program like AISH, because AISH I find kind of yo-yos, like whoever's in government next changes AISH for some odd reason. Like it's just kind of like one of those situations, and I think it would help us to put our focuses on that area and then move to this benefit. Am I wrong? Like my friends have been telling me, or
Well, I mean, I'm concerned about what the provincial government would do with the federal benefit. I mean, as you probably know, the provincial government has been saying that they want all these organizations like the cities and universities to essentially report to them and get approval before they get federal funding and use any kind of federal program. That bothers me, because not only is it bureaucratic, but they're sticking their fingers in the pie when they don't need to, and it doesn't serve the citizens of Alberta at all. It's in my view, it's sticking their nose where it doesn't belong,
right.
and they don't need to do those sorts of things. So as the Alberta Liberal Party would, of course, take, at least under me, and I think under pretty much every Liberal that possibly would lead this party, would take a different approach than what the current government is taking. I don't know about the NDP. They did index the AISH, for example, but it wasn't until near the end of their term. I don't know why it took them so long. I know that they had some financial pressures as well. And they took a lot of heat for deficits that they ran, even though the oil price was down, and that wasn't unusual in many ways. So if they were to form the government, it'd be interesting to see what they would do. But we don't know. As I said a little earlier in this interview, there are things I think we can do within the system to change the system to make it more collaborative and cooperative and more beneficial, let's put it this way, beneficial to everybody in Alberta rather than just a small group, which
Right.
is where the government's focus seems to be at the moment.
And what are those things?
Pardon me?
What are those steps, do you think? If we
Oh, in
want
terms,
to start,
well, I think that we would do better with an electoral system that's based on some sort of proportional representation. I think there are all sorts of different types of proportional representation, but most of the countries in Europe have gone to a proportional representation system of one sort or another. The one I prefer is a mixed member proportional system because it would give people a particular member of the legislature to go to for their territory or their area that they live in. But it would also open up some slots for people to be elected at large. And so you'd probably, as a result of that, get more voices in the legislature. There'd be more of an incentive for parties to work together rather than to be
right.
divisive and argumentative and confrontational. So I think that would help. In general, it's not something that's specifically oriented towards disabled people, but I think that Albertans would benefit generally if we had a government that was more collaborative and more cooperative, and the system itself can encourage that. It's not going to be perfect either, but it's an improvement. And so because I do think that there are groups that get neglected because they're not big enough to have a huge impact on the election. And so consequently, the government doesn't focus on those issues. Like I didn't hear much about the disability benefit or AISH during the election. I found that, they focused on other issues. And even now they're focusing on other issues. So those, what I might call smaller issues, or like, not that they're less important, they're just not in issues that affect a large group of people or as large a group of people. So they tend to get neglected. And if we had a more collaborative government, I think they would get looked after better.
And I'm a big believer in giving action steps. So if there was one action steps that anybody watching could do to help with writing to people, and we have 10 minutes, by the way. Sorry, really keeping you of this. But is there any action steps you would recommend?
Oh, on top of just continuing to lobby,
Yeah.
I'd have to think about that, to be honest. I do think that getting involved in the process would help, but I understand also that people that are disabled, vulnerable people generally, quite often have much more on their plate than they can handle right now. They don't, trying to do something in addition to that can be difficult, sometimes even impossible. So I personally would like to see that even my party form groups that are going to go out into the community and be more proactive in meeting with individuals in these groups, and all sorts of groups across the province, and getting feedback and creating a better liaison with them so that we have a better understanding of the issues that are out there. I mean, we do reach out to those people, and I don't know, are you in Edmonton or Calgary, or where are you located?
Calgary based, but I work with a group that's in Edmonton and Calgary.
Oh, okay. Well, we had, so for example, in the last election, Don Slater, who was, I believe he was our candidate in north end of Edmonton. I think it was Edmonton Decor. He's been involved in disabled issues and has a concern specifically with disabled issues. So having candidates like that and having people that can give that input helps in the parties to understand those issues. So that is something that, having an advocate that can be involved in the political system and reach out to the politicians is helpful. The politicians should also reach out to them. But sometimes the politicians don't, at least in my experience, don't necessarily reach out until they know to reach out. And so,
Right.
you know, the creating that liaison with politicians is critical to being able to get your message across to them. So I don't know if that sounds like an action item or any different than just trying to meet with them, but you might be able to
No,
set up.
meeting with them sounds great. Because
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends who would like to say their feelings, but big shy sometimes, or they just feel better within the group. So if we can remember, if you wouldn't mind sending me those names, that
Yeah.
would be wonderful. And thank you so much for this conversation. Do you have any final message to somebody?
Well, keep
Final
up the fight, I guess, is the message that I have.
thank you.
It's having interviews like this, will be something that will get people interested in your issues and follow them more closely. So I think your efforts in this program will be part of doing that. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you today as well.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. John, long living everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.